The worst person in history, Caligula. In 12 AD, in the heart of Rome, a child was born. But no one could have predicted that he would become one of the most ruthless figures in history. His name was Caligula. From 37 to 41 AD, he ruled the Roman Empire with absolute power. Raised by parents who were already considered psychopaths, he grew up in a brutal environment, an environment that shaped him into a true monster. His strange behaviors began due to his deep inferiority complex. He couldn't tolerate anyone looking down on him, so he ordered all the men around him to have their heads shaved. But believe me, this was nothing compared to what he would do next. He had the heads of statues of Roman gods cut off and replaced with his own likeness. Then, he declared himself a god and demanded that the people offer him sacrifices. His depravity reached such an extreme that he impregnated his own sister. But before the baby was born, he had her belly cut open, took out the fetus, and declared it a demigod. When his sister Drusilla died, he declared a period of mourning throughout Rome. No one was allowed to smile, bathe, eat with family, or even talk to each other in public. Despite his madness, the titles given to him were quite ironic. Father of the homeland and the armies, the greatest and most noble ruler, a man of faith. But the funniest part, he gave these titles to himself. During this period, Roman emperors were the most powerful and untouchable figures in the world. But with Caligula, this power allowed him to do the unimaginable. If you made eye contact with him, it was a death sentence. Tortures and perversions. Caligula had special torture devices made by his engineers. He took pleasure in watching people's bones being pulled apart, often while he was having his meal, and sometimes even tasting the victims himself. After spending all the wealth of the Roman treasury on extravagant pleasures, he came up with an easy solution: kill the rich and seize their assets. But even that wasn't enough. So he took a new approach. He forced the wives and daughters of Roman senators to work in a state-run brothel. At the grand opening, he stood before the Roman people and declared, "O people of Rome, your God has brought you great gifts. The families of the senators are now yours. For a small fee, you can do whatever you want with them." Since he didn't trust the senators, he decided to appoint his favorite horse as a senator. He even built a luxurious palace for the horse. According to Roman historians, he would sometimes even sleep in the same bed with it. He also forced senators to run alongside his chariot for miles, and even dressed them up as women to make them dance. He especially targeted overweight senators because he found them the most amusing. Gladiator fights and human sacrifices. Caligula loved gladiator battles, but instead of trained fighters, he forced the sick, elderly, and disabled to fight in the arena. Sometimes, he gathered a group of dwarves and made them battle each other for his amusement. But the most horrifying part, to save money on wild animals for the gladiator games, he randomly selected audience members and threw them to the lions. When Roman officials complained about the high cost of feeding the animals, Caligula came up with a solution. From now on, we will feed these animals with prisoners. And who were these prisoners? Completely random people he pointed at. His obsession with immortality. But Caligula's biggest fear was being forgotten. Other emperors had major disasters associated with their reigns. Augustus had the Varus disaster, and Tiberius had the Great Theater collapse. But there was no such event for Caligula, so he prayed for a major war defeat, a plague, or a great fire just so he could be remembered. He even dressed up as different gods and walked around Rome in their costumes. At one point, he dressed as Aphrodite and paraded through the streets. Perhaps his craziest act? He declared war on the sea god Neptune. He gathered his army, ordered them to attack the ocean, and then collected seashells as war trophies. His downfall, Caligula's madness, reached such extremes that even his own guards began to hate him. In January of 41 AD, after a sporting event, a group of guards ambushed him in a tunnel and stabbed him 30 times. His body was torn apart and fed to dogs. What remained was buried in a shallow grave. His wife and daughter were also brutally killed. After his death, the Roman Senate tried to erase his name from history and ordered the destruction of his statues. Aftermath. Thousands of books have been written about Caligula. Many of the horror movie characters we see today were inspired by his madness. One of the most famous films about him is Tinto Brass's Caligula. Many historians and experts believe that he suffered from epilepsy, schizophrenia, and other severe mental disorders. The image you see on screen is a digitally reconstructed version of Caligula's actual face. Based on his statues, it shows him with thick hair. However, historians suggest that sculptors depicted him with more hair than he actually had because they feared him. And remember, I could only tell you about 10% of what he actually did, because the law doesn't allow me to reveal more. For more shocking content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.